The announcement lasted less than a minute, but its impact tore through the palace like a command no one had prepared to hear. Catherine had been formally confirmed as the sole senior royal, holding the recognized rights to Diana's most emotionally significant tiara. Camilla remained silent as the words were read. Then her expression hardened. Her chair moved sharply against the floor, and she stormed from the room, leaving Charles frozen, and the future queen carrying a legacy heavier than any crown. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew everyone seated around the long table understood the damage those words could cause. William sat close to Catherine, while Anne watched from across the room, and two senior custodians waited beside the sealed ruling. Buckingham Palace had confirmed that the Princess of Wales alone held the ceremonial and family rights to wear and safeguard Diana's historic tiara. Ceremonial rights meant official permission to use the jewel during state occasions, memorial services, and major royal milestones. This was not merely a decision about possession. It decided who would publicly carry Diana's memory into the monarchy's next chapter. Camilla kept her hands folded as the first page was read. She remained controlled when the custodian described the tiara's history, but everything changed when he reached the words, "reserved for the Princess of Wales." Her fingers tightened. The Queen looked directly at Catherine, pushed her chair back with sudden force, and rose before Charles could speak. She did not ask permission to leave. She simply crossed the room, opened the door, and disappeared beyond it, as the sound of the closing wood cut through the silence. Catherine felt no victory. She remained seated, her face pale, because the ruling had placed her at the center of a conflict she had never asked to inherit. Diana's tiara carried far more than diamonds. It carried William's grief, the public's memory, and the painful history of the woman who came after her. The future queen understood that wearing it would never be treated as a simple royal choice. Every appearance would be judged as a statement about loyalty, legitimacy, and the past. Charles lowered his eyes and placed one hand over the document. The king did not call Camilla back, and that silence exposed how far the dispute had already gone. According to the written palace account prepared after the meeting, the confirmation had to be released immediately because an appearance involving the tiara was already listed on the royal calendar. Further delay could have created two competing instructions and a public scandal over who had authority. William moved quietly closer to Catherine as Anne continued staring at the closed door. The prince offered no celebration, only protection, while his aunt recognized the truth first. Camilla had not walked away because the matter was finished. She had walked away because the decision had forced every hidden wound into the open. Before the palace could understand what came next, it would have to confront what the tiara meant to both women, and why neither could treat it as jewelry alone. To the public, the tiara symbolized elegance, continuity, and royal tradition. Inside the family, it carried something far more dangerous. For Catherine, it represented responsibility to a woman she never met, but whose memory shaped William's life. For Camilla, it represented a boundary she could never cross without reopening the past. One jewel had become a mirror, forcing both women to face what the monarchy remembered, what it forgave, and what it would never allow to be rewritten. Catherine sat beside William after the announcement, still struggling to understand what had just been placed in her hands. The Princess of Wales was not simply the wife of the future king. The title connected her to the role once held by Diana and carried public expectations that reached far beyond ceremony. That mattered because every decision involving the tiara would be measured against a woman whose death had never ended the nation's attachment to her. It also mattered because William had spent years protecting his mother's memory while refusing to let private grief control his public duty. Catherine slowly removed her engagement ring and rested it in her palm. The jewel had once belonged to Diana, and its weight suddenly felt different. She admitted that she feared becoming the symbol of a battle she had never chosen. William listened without interrupting, then told her that accepting responsibility for the tiara was not an attack on Camilla. The prince insisted it was an obligation to preserve part of his mother's story before resentment, ambition, or palace convenience could change its meaning. Camilla carried a different wound into a smaller sitting room, where Charles found her alone. The queen consort had spent decades enduring public hostility, rebuilding her position and serving beside the monarch. Yet the announcement had made her feel secondary inside the very institution she now represented. Her rank gave her authority, but it did not automatically give her emotional ownership over objects permanently tied to Diana. That limit struck harder than any formal criticism, because it revealed that a crown could grant status without granting acceptance. Charles moved closer and tried to calm her, but he could not promise that the ruling would be reversed. The king's hesitation deepened her humiliation. She heard it as proof that Diana's memory still held more emotional power than her marriage, her service, or her title. A documented account prepared by a senior household aide later recorded that Anne had warned him days earlier that compromise was impossible. Allowing both women equal access would not create peace. It would erase the special meaning the jewel carried. Camilla finally looked at Charles and asked whether he had approved the wording that gave Catherine exclusive recognition. He did not answer at once. The monarch lowered his eyes, and that brief silence told her more than any explanation could. The wound had not begun in the announcement room. It traced back to one private ceremony, one unexpected request, and the moment the palace was forced to choose between avoiding conflict and defending Diana's legacy. The crisis did not begin when Camilla stormed out. It began 3 weeks earlier, behind closed doors, during preparations for a memorial reception at Kensington Palace. A velvet case had been opened, a ceremonial schedule placed beside it, and one unexpected request had silenced everyone present. Camilla wanted Diana's tiara assigned to her for the evening. Catherine said nothing, but William's reaction changed the course of the dispute and ensured the palace could no longer postpone its verdict. Camilla leaned toward the royal collection custodian and asked him to reserve the jewel for her appearance beside Charles. The custodian managed valuable objects held for royal use and kept formal records of who could wear them. This reception mattered because it would honor charities once supported by Diana, placing her memory at the heart of the evening. It also mattered because every choice made there would be read as a message about who now had the right to represent that legacy. William entered after the request had already changed the mood. The prince immediately noticed Catherine standing away from the table, while the velvet case remained open between Camilla and the custodian. He asked what had happened, listened to the answer, then told the official to close the case. His voice remained controlled, but the instruction carried unmistakable force. The future king understood that allowing the tiara to appear on the queen at that particular reception would not look neutral. It would look like a transfer of memory. Camilla refused to retreat. She argued that wearing the piece could demonstrate reconciliation and show that the monarchy had finally moved beyond old wounds. William answered that reconciliation could not be announced by taking control of someone else's history. The prince reminded her that the public did not see the tiara as a simple royal object. They saw Diana, they saw loss, and they saw the mother whose absence had shaped his entire life. Catherine stepped forward before the exchange could harden further. She said she did not need to wear the tiara and would gladly attend without it. Her restraint unsettled Camilla more than open opposition might have done. The princess was not fighting for display or attention. She was trying to prevent the jewel from becoming a weapon, and that made the queen's request appear less like reconciliation and more like pressure. The custodian finally opened a smaller sealed file. According to the documented meeting account, it contained a family instruction linking the jewel's ceremonial future to the Princess of Wales, rather than the reigning queen. A family instruction was a written direction setting out how an important royal object should be handled across generations. Its language gave Catherine the strongest traditional claim, and left Charles with little room to create a shared arrangement. Anne later confronted the king in private, and warned that the document could no longer remain hidden. She told Charles that ignoring it would make palace authority look manipulated for personal comfort. Camilla then demanded a ruling before the reception, and he agreed without revealing that the answer might destroy her expectations. When that sealed instruction was finally placed between Camilla and Catherine, the dispute stopped being historical or abstract. It became a face-to-face reckoning neither woman could escape. No aides were allowed inside. No statement had been prepared. When Catherine entered the private drawing room, Camilla was already standing beside the fireplace, with the palace ruling on a table between them. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then the queen asked the question that had remained buried beneath years of ceremony. Did Catherine truly believe she alone deserved to carry Diana's legacy? The answer came quietly, but it struck harder than anger, and shattered the final possibility of an easy reconciliation. Camilla pointed toward the written ruling and accused the palace of turning Catherine's popularity into a shield for the future reign. The document was a formal family decision, explaining who could wear and safeguard the tiara during official occasions. She argued that the younger woman would receive public admiration while the current queen was left carrying the humiliation of the past. That accusation mattered because the dispute was no longer only about Diana. It had become a judgment on whether decades of service could ever overcome the history attached to Camilla's place beside Charles. Catherine held her ground. She said she had never requested exclusive rights and did not see the jewel as a reward. The princess explained that William could not separate the tiara from his mother's memory, and she could not accept it without respecting that pain. Her answer carried another difficult truth. Surrendering the right would not create peace. It would simply teach the family that emotional pressure could erase a boundary whenever it became uncomfortable. Camilla's anger began to crack. She admitted that every restriction involving Diana reminded her that marriage, service, and a crown had not removed the judgment surrounding her. The queen had reached the highest position beside the monarch, yet certain doors remained closed. That contrast wounded her deeply, because it proved public rank and emotional acceptance were not the same thing. Catherine refused to apologize for the decision. She told Camilla that compassion did not require surrendering every limit or pretending all royal roles carried the same inheritance. The princess spoke without cruelty, but her calm made the words impossible to dismiss. One woman was defending her dignity, the other was defending a memory tied to her husband's deepest grief. Camilla lifted the ruling from the table. She folded it once, pressed the crease with her thumb, then placed it back without tearing it. The gesture ended the argument more powerfully than shouting could have done. She could reject the meaning, but she could not destroy the decision. Charles entered only after raised voices reached the adjoining room. The king found both women composed, which made the damage more frightening. Camilla walked past him without touching his arm, while Catherine remained behind, saddened rather than victorious. He finally understood that his family had divided along a line he had spent years trying to soften. Yet their confrontation had not truly decided the outcome. Behind it stood inheritance instructions, royal custodians, and constitutional limits that even the sovereign could not simply sweep aside. Charles possessed the crown, but not every object beneath it belonged to his personal will. As the king studied the inheritance file, one uncomfortable truth became impossible to avoid. Reversing Catherine's rights would require him to ignore written family instructions, established ceremonial precedent, and the advice of those responsible for protecting the royal collection. The decision was no longer about pleasing his wife. It was about whether the sovereign would alter the meaning of Diana's legacy to prevent conflict inside his marriage. Charles read the same paragraph twice, then removed his glasses and placed them beside the file. The tiara remained under protected royal custody, meaning it was cared for and controlled by officials, rather than treated as anyone's private possession. Yet its ceremonial designation, the formal rule deciding who could wear it at approved occasions, linked the jewel directly to the position of Princess of Wales. That connection gave Catherine priority, and allowed her to decide when its appearance would honor Diana rather than exploit her memory. Charles looked toward the senior custodian and asked whether any lawful interpretation could give Camilla equal standing. The king's question exposed the conflict he could no longer hide. If he enforced the instruction, his wife would feel rejected inside the institution she served. If he weakened it, William could see the move as another attempt to soften or redistribute his mother's legacy. Both paths threatened the family, but only one preserved the written rule. The custodian answered through a documented consultation entered into the palace record. Shared access, he explained, would contradict the wording of the instruction and decades of public association between the tiara and Diana. The official did not speak harshly, yet his conclusion left little room for comfort. Camilla could hold the highest rank beside the monarch, but the jewel carried an emotional history that rank alone could not erase. Anne refused to let her brother retreat into delay. She warned Charles that the monarchy survived because personal discomfort did not automatically overturn established duty. The Princess Royal understood why he feared isolating Camilla, but she also understood the greater danger. Reversing the arrangement would make the palace appear willing to alter tradition whenever private pressure became strong enough. Charles admitted that the ruling might look like the institution had chosen Diana's memory over the living queen. Anne answered that ignoring it would look worse. It would suggest the crown could bend written instructions to protect one marriage, even when that decision wounded the future king and placed Catherine in an impossible position. William deliberately remained outside the final consultation. The prince knew his presence could be used to claim he had pressured the sovereign, though he had privately told a senior aide that Catherine must not be forced to surrender her rights. Charles finally lifted the pen. The king signed with one slow stroke, set it down, and ordered that Camilla be told privately before the public announcement. She received the news only minutes before entering that room. His signature settled the palace question, but it did not settle his household, and the fallout was already moving beyond the closed door. Within an hour of Camilla's exit, the palace calendar began to change. A joint engagement was postponed. A private dinner was cancelled. Staff members were instructed to route all questions through a single office, as rumors raced faster than official explanations. But the most painful consequence unfolded away from the public statement. Charles entered Camilla's rooms expecting fury, and found something worse. She had removed her jewelry, dismissed her attendants, and was sitting in silence beside an unopened dinner tray. Camilla did not look up when Charles entered. She told him she would not attend the memorial reception where Catherine's right to the tiara was expected to be formally acknowledged. The event mattered because it honored causes linked to Diana, and any absence from the senior royal group would be treated as a public message. It also mattered because the reception had already become the first test of whether the family could continue working together after the ruling. Charles asked her not to turn one decision into a retreat from royal duty. The king reminded her that duty meant carrying out public responsibilities even when private emotions remained unresolved. Camilla answered that the palace had already made her presence symbolic. If attending meant standing beside the woman chosen to protect Diana's legacy, then refusing to appear might be the only decision still belonging to her. Palace aides quickly postponed a joint visit involving the couple. Appearing together would invite questions neither could answer without exposing the fracture inside their marriage. The delay protected them for a few hours, but it also confirmed that the fallout had moved beyond one argument. Catherine reacted by asking her staff to remove the tiara from the reception plan. She hoped silence around the jewel would lower the temperature. William refused. The prince told her that surrendering the appearance under pressure would turn a confirmed right into something others could control through anger. He knew she had spent years avoiding comparisons with Diana, Yet the family kept placing her inside those comparisons and expecting her to absorb the pain quietly. William carried that anger directly to Charles. He accused the palace of using Catherine's restraint as a shield whenever conflict became difficult. The king answered sharply that his son could not understand the burden of balancing a marriage against the monarchy. William did not raise his voice. He replied that he understood exactly what happened when an institution asked one woman to carry everyone else's silence. Camilla made her next move before midnight. In a handwritten message recorded by the collection office, she requested a complete list of every restriction attached to Diana's personal and ceremonial jewels. Anne discovered the request through the official correspondence file and immediately understood its danger. The Queen might be preparing a formal challenge, or confronting, for the first time, the limits no crown could remove. The palace expected another war over documents. Instead, the true turning point would come without advisors or rulings, when Charles and William finally spoke not as king and heir, but as father and son. Late that evening, William found Charles alone with the unsigned memorial program in front of him. There were no aides, no official folders, and no one waiting to record what was decided. The king looked exhausted rather than angry. For the first time since the announcement, father and son spoke without titles protecting them. What began as a discussion about Camilla's absence became a painful admission about Diana, and the cost of allowing silence to govern the family for too long. William entered the private study and closed the door himself. The prince did not sit until Charles looked up and asked why he had come. A memorial program was the official order of speeches, guests, and ceremonial moments planned for the reception. Its unsigned pages mattered, because Camilla's expected absence threatened to turn an event honoring charitable service into a public display of family division. It also mattered because Catherine's connection to the tiara had already overshadowed the causes the evening was meant to support. Charles admitted he had known the ruling was correct long before he signed it. The king delayed because he hoped time might create a compromise that tradition and memory could not provide. He wanted to protect Camilla without weakening Diana's place. But his silence had done the opposite. It allowed one woman to expect the decision might change, and made another feel guilty for receiving something she had never demanded. William's anger did not disappear, but it became quieter. He told his father that Catherine had carried the discomfort of the dispute because the palace trusted her to remain calm. The future king said that trust had become unfair. Her restraint was treated as permission to delay, while Camilla's persistence was treated as a reason to keep negotiating. Charles confessed what he had feared most. His wife could wear a crown, stand beside the sovereign, and serve the institution for years, yet still remain excluded from its deepest emotional symbols. The monarch believed the tiara confirmed a painful limit that rank could not remove. William acknowledged Camilla's service, but he refused to blur the truth. The prince said acceptance could not require Diana's place to be slowly redistributed until nothing distinct remained. His mother's memory was not an obstacle to peace. It was a boundary the family had to respect if peace was ever going to be honest. Charles finally asked whether Catherine intended to wear the tiara at the reception. William revealed that she had chosen not to, not from surrender, but because the evening should honor charitable work rather than royal conflict. The decision changed everything. The king understood that she was defending the right without exploiting it, showing restraint neither power nor resentment could command. Charles stood and signed the program. He would tell Camilla himself that Catherine's rights remained intact, while the palace would honor the Queen's service separately instead of forcing both women into symbolic competition. By morning, that private decision had become a public story, and one image outside Kensington Palace would capture the nation's verdict more powerfully than any statement. At sunrise, the dispute was no longer contained by palace walls. Broadcasters interrupted their schedules. Newspaper presses carried competing versions of Camilla's exit, and crowds gathered where Diana's memory still felt closest. Yet the defining public moment was not a furious interview or a hostile chant. It was a line of people outside Kensington Palace, placing white roses beneath a photograph of Catherine and Diana displayed side by side, an image that transformed the controversy into a judgment about continuity. One newspaper captured the mood with a front-page headline that read, "Catherine keeps Diana's legacy," placed above separate images of the Princess of Wales and Camilla leaving different palace entrances. A morning broadcaster described the dispute not as a fight over ownership, but as a decision about who held the emotional authority to carry Diana's memory into the next reign. That distinction mattered, because the tiara had become more than jewelry. It now represented whether the monarchy could honor its past without using that past to punish the present. Outside Kensington Palace, visitors placed white roses near the gates as the crowd slowly grew. One woman held a handwritten sign reading, "Legacy is protected, not claimed." The message spread across television screens within minutes. It mattered because the public was not simply choosing between two royal women. People were responding to decades of grief, loyalty, and unresolved emotions surrounding Diana's place in the family. Catherine watched the coverage from a private breakfast room beside William. The princess looked deeply uncomfortable as commentators praised her restraint and criticized the Queen's exit. She told him that public support must never become permission to humiliate Camilla. William agreed, but the prince also reminded her that silence could not mean surrender. He understood that protecting another person's dignity did not require denying the truth of the ruling. Camilla watched the same broadcast alone until Charles entered. The Queen showed sadness rather than anger, as the image of her departure appeared again and again. She admitted through a recorded private conversation preserved in a household account that her storming exit had become the only moment the public remembered. Charles told her the palace would not reverse Catherine's rights, but it would not allow years of service to be erased by one act of pain. Camilla finally withdrew her written request for the complete jewelry restrictions record. She accepted that continuing the challenge would make her appear trapped in competition with Diana, instead of building a role of her own. The Queen then agreed to attend the memorial reception beside Charles. The palace confirmed that Catherine would safeguard the tiara, but would not wear it that evening. With the challenge withdrawn, and the family preparing to enter the same room again, the final question was no longer who had won. It was what each person was finally willing to accept. The final resolution arrived without another announcement. At the memorial reception, Catherine entered without Diana's tiara. Camilla stood beside the king, and William watched both women choose restraint over spectacle. The jewel remained secured inside the royal collection, its rights unchanged and its meaning protected. No one had been stripped of dignity, but no boundary had been erased. In that carefully controlled absence, the family delivered its clearest verdict. Diana's legacy would be honored, Catherine's responsibility would stand, and Camilla would no longer challenge it. Catherine paused before entering the reception and found Camilla waiting without Charles or William beside her. For several seconds, neither woman moved. The memorial reception was a formal gathering, honoring charitable work connected to Diana, which meant every gesture that evening carried unusual emotional weight. It mattered because the event could either confirm the family's division or prove that duty could survive even after trust had been damaged. Camilla spoke first. She told Catherine that she had withdrawn her challenge and would not seek access to the tiara again. The Queen did not apologize for feeling wounded, and she did not pretend the ruling had been easy to accept. But she acknowledged that the jewel carried a responsibility separate from rank. A crown could define her position beside the sovereign, yet it could not automatically give her control over every symbol tied to the past. Catherine answered with equal care. She told Camilla that she had never wanted her publicly diminished. The princess promised the tiara would be worn rarely, respectfully, and only when its appearance served remembrance rather than competition. She understood that protecting Diana's legacy did not require humiliating the woman who now stood beside Charles. But compassion also did not require surrendering a boundary that had finally been made clear. Camilla gave a restrained nod. Catherine returned it. They did not embrace, and neither woman tried to erase what had happened. Instead, they entered the reception together, with the truth between them finally understood. Charles watched them cross the room and felt relief mixed with accountability. The king knew his delay had intensified the crisis, giving hope where he should have given clarity. He resolved never again to use silence as a substitute for leadership inside his family. William looked toward Catherine and saw something deeper than victory. The prince understood that she could carry Diana's memory without copying her, and prepare for queenship without turning inherited symbolism into personal power. The verdict was complete. Catherine retained the exclusive ceremonial and safeguarding rights attached to Diana's tiara. Camilla accepted that her queenship would be defined by her own service, not by possession of another woman's symbols. The monarchy survived because it chose clarity over convenience. The tiara became neither a weapon nor a prize, but a protected link between Diana's memory, William's grief, and Catherine's future responsibility. Camilla's exit exposed a wound the palace had avoided for years, but Catherine's restraint closed it. The past was not rewritten, the present was not destroyed, and the future of Diana's legacy was placed exactly where the monarchy had decided it belonged. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.